thank you. Yes, we do a recording. So thank you everybody for coming. And we'll start with a short meditation. Then we do a short writing exercise to do with ending the year, wrapping up the year. It's always such a nice thing to do, to reflect on the year that has been. And then we have some time for sharing. It's a small group, so we won't need to go into breakout rooms. We'll just do it in this small group. And of course, that's optional. Of course, nobody has to share. And then we also have some craft tips on how to write satisfying story endings, because that's a really interesting topic. Believe it or not, sometimes it's helpful to write your ending at the beginning. But before we go into all of that, let's just come to sit in a comfortable position. Have your feet hip width apart, and then just come, be present right in this moment, and allow yourself to just drop into stillness. It's the start of the week. You know, it's that time when we have a lot of things already built up in our heads. Let them all drop away just for that hour that we have together to write together. And then take a nice deep inhale, bring your shoulders up and back and down. Have your back straight but not rigid. You might want to place your hands cupped in your lap. And then just breathe naturally, paying attention to the quality of your breath as it flows in and out of your body, in and out. And in between each in and out breath, there's a little pause. And see if you can identify that pause and drop into the stillness in between breath. Letting go all those busy thoughts. Just be right here in this breath and the next breath. And now bring your awareness to the topic of our workshop today, endings, which always bring new beginnings. And you may want to reflect on your own life, on your writing goals, or you might even want to focus on a story, a book you're working on. And take another conscious, long, slow inhale. And exhale, slow exhale. And again, full in-breath. And exhale. And I'll read you the quote that we're going to write to for 3 to 4, let's say 4 to 5 minutes of writing time. Year's end is neither an end nor a beginning, but a going on with all the wisdom that experience can instill in us. Year's end is neither an end nor a beginning, but a going on with all the wisdom that experience can instill in us. And now pick up your pen and just start writing in your journal whatever comes to mind about year's end being neither an end nor a beginning, but a going on with all the wisdom that experience can instill in us. Allow yourself to just write, let it flow, whatever comes up, and I'll set my timer. And as you write, remember that every ending is also a new beginning. But often we just don't know that that new beginning is about to come. So you might want to reflect on that as well. Something ending is always a way towards a new beginning. What is ending for you as we end the year? What is it you need before you can begin again? Maybe what needs to end so that something new can begin. We've got another 2 minutes. We've got another 30 seconds. Just keep writing, digging deep, see what comes up. And also think about how you might feel at the thought of another year ending, something new beginning. How does that make you feel?
Old.
Old. All right, that was 5 minutes. Just finish the sentence, finish the thought. Might be the start of your next book, so don't miss it. All right. So, how did you find that? Did anything useful come up? What were some of your thoughts? Anybody brave to volunteer to share what came up?
I'm brave.
Go
Good.
on.
Sure.
So that first one about the going on, and it's like the end of something and then going on to something else. I said, coming out of the small suburb that I accumulated so many tools to add to my tool belt, I take the turn that leads me onto the loop that brings me onto the motorway, accelerating as I approach.
Mhm.
So I saw it as like the loop, then you go on. So that's our little break, our little holiday season.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I like the metaphor of the car, like you're
Yeah.
speeding up and you're taking the turn in the road. Yes, very good.
Yeah, let's go get it.
And
Yeah.
do you know where that road is going to, or is it just like in a holiday? You might just go on and explore and see.
I've got a 5-year plan.
Ah,
That's on.
that sounds
Lovely.
good.
Yeah.
And plan also include writing a book, or
I'm writing more maybe for screen and for playwriting.
yes, good, good.
John was
Yeah.
one of my screenplay students.
Yes, and Netflix, we always need more. I don't know how the industry works, but I'm sure there's a bottomless demand.
Tougher
Great,
than
thank
Yeah.
publishing.
you for your name. Anybody else would like to share what came up?
Oh, you're all so quiet. I'll have a go. All right. I got an endless going on sounds exhausting. I can't keep on going and going and going as I have been. That's the wisdom I've learnt this year. The importance of the pause, the still place that comes with each ending. Yes, of course, there's a going on. Each ending is not a complete halt, but a pause, a chance to reset and renew, to begin afresh after reflecting on what the ending has taught us. It may not fall with the calendar year, but endings come and go. Always that with that pause, the important pause, that if we do not take, will find us back on the wheel, running, 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 exhausted and without joy. I, for one, am getting off the wheel and I'm going to roll around in the straw a while and take a little nap.
Good. Yes. I remember that time when we all in lockdown, or some of us, and some people refer to the pandemic as the
Uh-huh.
pause we needed. I mean, not everybody had for me, it really was a
It stayed.
pause for everybody. Pause. So treasure the pause.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments or brave people to share?
You
We're
don't
just
have to read it, you can just talk about it.
yes, yes. And we're not expecting, obviously, Pulitzer Prize writing here. We're expecting
I
just
am.
reflections on, what happens when we end and begin.
I'll go if you like, Kerstin.
Go, Annie.
Okay, so I started off on a personal level talking about my 70th year. And I've just written new experiences, new friends, and connecting with old. Reflections on my aging self. Live each day with gratitude. And we all know it might be your last. do more of the helpful things, kind of what Edwina was talking about, like, and, use yoga and meditation to enable that. And I've just got slow down, exclamation mark. But I've also, I don't have to read it all, but I also talked about the year maybe I'm jumping, am I? I talked about the
Oh,
year
no,
in
don't
I
worry,
talked
Ellie.
about the year in a broader sense, that it just seems to be a bit of a watershed moment. Maybe not, but
Yeah.
I just feel that politically, socially, economically, it's been challenging for many, and so much sadness and death and tragedy as the world seems to tip further to the right.
Mm.
Totalitarianism, war. Is this a new beginning, or are we at,
No.
are we at a tipping point? Yeah, I've got a bit more, but I just won't.
Yeah.
And do it all. But will humanity tip towards the apocalypse or find a way through? Hope must triumph, but we must also be realistic optimists.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. This resonates strongly with me. My family's in Europe. My parents are old. They've been through World War II, and the threat that there might be another war is very present for them. And as Edwina said in yesterday's session, one of the things as writers and artists we can do is just keep delivering hope, even when there is no hope, because it is that, yeah, it can, if we think about it, it can be perceived as, are we heading towards disaster
Are
or
we at
not?
the beginning of the end?
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, yes. All right. Thank you very
Sorry
much.
to dampen the enthusiasm.
Well,
No,
maybe just on a personal note,
okay.
because those of you who get my newsletter, I always write about my life. So my ending is, and my new beginning is, I'm moving into a new home.
Oh,
So even if the apocalypse comes, I figure I'm in far north Queensland. I'm in a new home, and I'll have a new office with properly set up, Zoom,
I'll
of
just
course.
remind you of the Brisbane line in the Second World War where they gave away Queensland completely. So you're not safe up
I
there.
am
We'll have
aware.
to evacuate you.
Kirsten, are you in the same area?
I'm moving to Palm Cove. It's north
Oh,
of
yes.
Cairns. Yes, yes,
Beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah.
Have
And
to
there's
come
a spare
visit.
room, Annie. There's a spare room.
Well, I've already found several possible potential venues for retreats. So
Oh,
that space.
All
Okay,
right.
hand over to Edwina for some craft. Our next, oh no, Edwina at Vietnam and then craft.
Yes, yes, yes. So first of all, we have to say that we still have 2 spots left for Vietnam. Bali is almost full. We've only got 2 rooms left there as well. We've got 4 spots left in Italy if people want to come to Italy. But what we are really selling now is Vietnam because it's soon and it's going to be gorgeous there in February. And what the rooms that are left are in their own self-contained bungalow right on the river. And it's gorgeous. You've got living areas, your own kitchen, though all the meals are provided. And the price we have now is $500 off. So it's 2,600-ish if you get just 1 room. But if you book with a friend, it's only 2,500 each, which is, I've seen weekend retreats that cost that much, and that doesn't include your accommodation or food. So,
And Annie went last year. Didn't we have a ball, Annie?
oh,
oh
yeah.
yes. I was.
Oh,
No.
what happened to Annie?
Oh, that's not good.
She was going to say it was fun.
What I was going to say there is Annie and the people who stayed in the villa that Annie shared, Arik, who came to yesterday's workshop, and others, and Cindy and so on, they stayed in touch and they formed their own little writers groups. For the entire year following the retreat, they have been meeting on Zoom, and then they organized a small retreat in person in Queensland, which I thought was wonderful. So that's the kind of thing that can happen also after a retreat. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the best thing for me of what happens on retreat is the writers. You find your people, finding your people and your writing buddies, because writing buddies, we need them because writing is a crazy thing to do. We put our hearts out on the page and send it out to be criticized and rejected.
Yeah.
So we need our writing buddies who tell us your work is still beautiful and, keep going, keep going. You'll find your people. Okay. Hello, Ute.
Ute.
On
Ute.
Uta. So let's start talking about endings. So yesterday I went through my bookshelves and I found a selection of books and thought, let's just look at the endings and see what they can teach us. So the first one is our classic, how can I make it? There we go. Emily Bronte, Wuthering Heights. So for those of you who haven't read it, think of Kate Bush out of the wily, windy moors. And it's where Heathcliff and Cathy and the tragic love story set on the moors. So how does it end? Let's have a little look. So it has one of those witness narrators who is not a protagonist. It's a man who comes to stay in the moors at the house. And at the beginning, he sets the story up. Then we go into the story of Cathy and Heathcliff. And then we come back to him at the end. Oh, hang on, there's Annie back again. Okay, so here we are. This is Wuthering Heights, Annie, and the ending. I sought and soon discovered the 3 headstones on the slope next to the moor, the middle one grey and half buried in heath. Edgar Linton's only half harmonised by the turf and moss creeping up its foot. Heathcliff's still bare. I lingered around them under that benign sky, watched the moths fluttering among the heath and harebells, listened to the soft wind breathing through the grass, and wondered how anyone could ever imagine unquiet slumbers for the sleepers in that quiet earth.
That's a strong sentence.
Yes, it's such a beautiful sentence. So we get a strong image too of the graves and of that beautiful landscape, that desolate but beautiful landscape. But for me, those words, the unquiet slumbers, because essentially this is a ghost story. And she's just letting us know that we will have unquiet slumbers, that there is that darker story beneath it all that lingers with us. So that's what we want to remember too. Not only setting up a beautiful image, but can we leave something that stays with the reader, that unquietness. We want our ideas to linger on with them. Okay, so there's our classic. Next, I went to Steinbeck because I love Steinbeck. And I love especially the short things, like Hemingway's Old Man and the Sea, and this one, Steinbeck's The Pearl. They're short and they are in many ways perfect. You can perfect small things. It's much harder to perfect a whole novel. I mean, I think people like Helen Garner, really wonderful people can. So let's have a look. So as the title indicates, this book is about a pearl, a very special pearl. It's a black pearl. And the whole quest or question of the novel is, will he find the pearl? He finds the pearl quite early. And then what impact will this pearl, this very valuable and precious pearl, have on this family and their community? And this is how it ended. And Kino drew back his arm and flung the pearl with all his might. Kino and Wana watched it go, winking and glimmering under the setting sun. And the pearl settled into the lovely green water and dropped towards the bottom. It settled down to the sand bottom among the fern-like plants. And the pearl lay on the floor of the sea. A crab scampering over the bottom raised a little cloud of sand, and when it settled, the pearl was gone. And the music of the pearl drifted to a whisper and disappeared. So what do we know from reading that? I mean, he's throwing the pearl away, a very valuable and expensive pearl. So we know without having read the book that this pearl has wreaked havoc in the lives of these people. And the most important lesson that I want us to all take from this is that the central quest, the central premise of the novel or novella is, what will this pearl, how will this pearl affect the people in the story? And we realize it has adversely affected them, but we bring that question or quest to a complete end. We answer the question. We answer the quest. The pearl, what has it done? It has destroyed them. What have they had to do? They have had to release the pearl back to the sea. So our answer. So whatever book you're writing, you need that central quest or question that drives the reader through, the narrative drive. And we're always working through that, keeping that as the underlying pull. Each scene will have its own quest or question, but the big one that sees us all the way through must be answered in the end. If it's not, we're leaving our reader feeling very unsatisfied. And as Kerstin says, we break the contract with the reader. When we set up that question, we must answer it. So if your quest or question is, will the woman find her child that she gave up for adoption in the 60s, and we reach the end and she hasn't, or, well, if she hasn't, that's an answer. But if halfway through she forgets about the search for the child and goes off and climbs the Himalayas, that's breaking the contract. So just keeping in mind your central quest or question and making sure that you answer it at the end. The next one I picked is The Outsiders. People know this one. It's got a beautiful poem in it that is often quoted when people suffer untimely deaths. Nothing gold can stay. So it's about a group of adolescent boys. I used it very much when I was writing Thrill Seekers. So let's have a look at his ending. I sat down and picked up my pen and thought for a minute, remembering a handsome dark boy with a reckless grin and a hot temper, a tough tow-headed boy with a cigarette in his mouth and a bitter grin on his hard face. Remembering, and this time it didn't hurt, a quiet, defeated-looking 16-year-old whose hair needed cutting badly and who had black eyes with a frightened expression. 1 week had taken all three of them. And I decided I could tell people, beginning with my English teacher. I wondered for a long time how to start that theme, how to start writing about something that was important to me. And I finally began like this. When I stepped out into the bright sunlight from the darkness of the movie house, I had only two things on my mind, Paul Newman and a ride home. Now look at the beginning. When I stepped out into the bright sunlight from the darkness of the movie house, I had only two things on my mind, Paul Newman and a ride home. So you can see how satisfying that feels when we return to something from the beginning. So that's my biggest tip to make your story or your book feel complete, is return to something from the beginning. You don't have to copy exact sentences as Essie Hinton has done here, but giving us an image perhaps that at the beginning, one of my favorite movies is Moonlight. And at the beginning, there's an image on the dashboard of the tough drug dealer's car of a bulldog sort of representing his toughness. And at the end, that same image comes back. At the beginning of Margaret Atwood's Alias Grace, there's a red flower in the pathway. At the end of the book, there's that colour red returns again. That brings everything a full circle so you can create that shape. It's a great trick. If you are lost for finding your ending, go and have a look at your beginning. See if you can find that colour or a few words or an idea that you can return to right at the end. Okay, so we've got the main things are a resonant image or idea that stays with the reader. Ending, make sure we are answering the quest or the question. Finding something from your beginning that comes back at the end. Now let's have a look at Helen Garner, one of our very, very beautiful Australian writers. She's got her new book out, which I'm dying to get my hands on. It's about growing older and her relationship with her grandson, about boys on that cusp of manhood. Anyone who's had sons will know just how much boys change.
Not fully, really.
Yeah. So, and this book is the central quest or question is, how will Helen cope looking after her friend who has cancer. So her friend is really into alternative therapies, and she comes to stay with Helen to get one of those treatments in Sydney or Melbourne. I think it's probably more like it. So she is taking her friend to another friend. I handed her Nicola's bag and stepped back. And though Nicola held both my hands and kissed my cheeks and looked at me in the eyes, and though now the three of us walked shoulder to shoulder like sisters across the terminal to the car, I had already left my place at Nicola's side. It was the end of my watch, and I handed it over to her. So you can see that quest is completed. We also have that, I suppose it's that resonant thought of how much can we give? And this, she could have kept going on and on. Okay. She could have kept going and then told us about how the friend actually went and when did the friend die and the last little bits and the last email she sent her or something like that. But that's another choice that we have, and it's a very important one. Often the ending is before we think it is. So anyone who knows any Raymond Carver, he's very famous for his open endings, the not quite there ending that leaves the reader room. Leaving the reader room is a great trick. So it wasn't actually Raymond Carver who invented those endings. It was his editor. I think it's Ezra Pound, who, Raymond Carver wrote on an additional 3 to 10 pages, and his editor would go in and say, no, it ends there. So you can always find your ending too. Look at your beginning. Your beginning may come much later than you think, and your ending may come earlier. When it's memoir, it's a bit trickier because we keep living.
Yeah, but in the memoir, you're only writing about one
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
aspect from your life. So you're not having to wait until you live the next year or the next year after that. Yeah.
Yeah. So Kerstin, tell us about the ending of your book and how that happened.
Okay, so most of you will be familiar with it, Loving My Lying, Dying, Cheating Husband. And it starts with, I'll just give you the first sentence. Raiding my heart, actually, I can read it. I don't have to read it. I know it off by heart. Raiding my husband's inbox is a very bad idea, an irreversible act of trespassing. And of course, then in that very short first chapter, I give you that image of me getting bombshell news. My husband is both terminally ill and serially unfaithful. And then the book is about falling apart. And of course, putting myself back together again. So the ending is where I meet a widow in India. I go to a cooking class. I actually go to India because I feel in our Western culture, we don't really talk about grief or death. So I want to see it flood-lit in an Indian context. And so I go and visit the cremation grounds and so on. I end up visiting this cooking class with an Indian widow who has had a much worse, let's say, plight to mine or to most widows in the West because they become outcasts. But she's, doing these cooking classes now. So she says, after everybody's left the cooking class, I'm alone with Shashi, inspecting the spices and essential utensils she's placed for sale on the coffee table. She gives me a little sachet with lemon salt, a present to take home. Then she takes both of my hands into hers. I'm also a widow. The words just come out. She nods, as if she could tell. What day did your husband die? She says. I write it down on the back of her photocopied recipes. 1111. 1st of January 2011. Shashi doesn't flinch. She pulls a framed photo of her husband from an empty shelf and hands it to me. Underneath the photo, there's a printed sticker with his name and the dates of his life and death. He died on 1/10/01, 1st of the 10th, 2001. So we have that symmetry of numbers. Shashi looks into my eyes and squeezes both of my hands with the firm grip of a grief-stricken woman who has remade herself. There's nothing more powerful in the world. And this actually, so I give you the image of the broken woman or the woman about to break into a million pieces. And then I give you the image of a broken woman who has made herself whole again as the last sentence. So in other words, I do create that circle for the reader. And that is also something I learned from writing feature articles for magazines, when they always tell you start with a hook, and then in the end you go back to that, and that gives that satisfying conclusion, or the reader is, we've come full circle. And the other thing that I should say here is, I actually wrote the very end of my book, which is an epilogue, which Edwina insisted it needed, and I think it's great that she made me put the epilogue in there. But that epilogue I wrote at a retreat. I went to before I actually got serious about writing this book, or before I really sat down to write the first draft of the book it became. I went to a retreat, and the facilitator said to everybody, write your ending. And we were like, hang on, I haven't written my book yet. And it was a wonderful exercise because it gave me that end point to write towards. And it really sort of helps in your mind to give you that roadmap. So that's an exercise I think we'll do next, isn't it, Edwina?
Yes, that's what we're doing next. So, of course, that wasn't Kerstin's original ending. She had written on past that point. So it was identifying that point where that was so strong, so powerful. That was where I got the shivers when I was reading it, that became the obvious ending then. So it's hard to find those sometimes ourselves. So that's when getting another writer or a professional to read it will help just identify where the true ending is. But you can often find it yourself, so have a look. Yeah.
And I was going to say, and the same is true with the beginning. Of course, especially when you're a new writer, I had written pages and pages before that one sentence that then became the opening sentence. And then it wasn't Edwina, it was somebody else I showed to, professional, and she said, this is your opening sentence. I said, what about all those beautiful 10 pages I wrote before that? She said, that's an exercise in writing. Just let them go.
Yes, and that's what happens as first drafts, and it doesn't matter how many books you've written, the first draft will have a whole lot of writing that won't end up in the final draft, unless you're one of those meticulous planners. So that can short circuit the process. But I think a lot of that pre-writing writing, or that first draft writing, it is so valuable, and it remains in the book. The writer needs to know all of that stuff. Then the writer needs to excavate it all if it's a life story, or we're writing to find out about the characters if it's fiction. It all needs to be there in that first draft, but a lot of it will go in the second draft when we are coming to shape that story and refine it. So you can...
Sorry, I was just going to say, like Terry Pratchett said famously, the first draft is you telling yourself the story. And a lot of new writers think, oh, I've written the first draft. That's it. I've written a book. No, you've just told yourself the story with, like Edwina just said, all those bits of information we need to have that story somehow present. But the reader doesn't need all of those bits, because the reader also needs to, identify, use their own imagination. Yeah.
I really like what you said last night too, Kerstin, about the writing their personal essay for people writing memoir, writing the 5,000 word essay. So the short version of it. So it's basically, and you can do that with a novel as well. Anything you're writing, write the short version. Basically, you're writing we do it in screenplay a lot. We do that outline where the whole story goes down. It doesn't have to be fancy, but we've got the whole plot outline at least jotted down for ourselves. And that can really help shape it and give you great impetus too, because whenever you lose your way, you just pick up that 5,000 word essay you wrote and use that. I think you did that, didn't you, Kerstin?
Yes, I did. Yeah. And that was very helpful. Yeah.
Change much? Apart from, did the basic structure change much?
Well, actually, I had a lot more emphasis on the final, the third act, and actually, I realized that needs to be the shorter part, and the first act needs to, set up the story, and then the middle part. So it was about figuring out the acts, the length of the various acts, and that's actually a skill in itself to learn that, and that's something you figure out as you write. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I wanted to have a look at Thrill Seekers as well, because sometimes you have to add stuff on. So Thrill Seekers is based on my brother's adolescent battle with adolescent schizophrenia. And I left it originally, when I sent it off, I left it in a very dark place. So I left it at the dark night of the soul in screenwriting terms, where everything was at its possible worst. He was leaving the mental hospital. His brother was completely gone on medication, and there was no hope, and he was cursing God. But the other thing that's important, and especially now more than ever before, is that we at least provide a ray of hope. There doesn't need to be a happy ending, but there needs to be a glimmer of hope. So when I got the offer of publication from the publishers in England, they said, yes, but you just need to, give us a ray of hope at the end. So I wrote a ray of hope where Brian, the elder brother, has found a man has stepped up in as an alternative father figure, and there's a whole lot about boats and so on during the book. So now Brian is out on a great big boat with this guy, and the guy gives him the wheel of the boat. So this is where I would have ended. So looking down the river, I steer a straight course, right down the middle, like Ray said. Feeling 10 feet tall with a chest as wide and strong as a bear's, I roll with the movement of the boat. Salty water sprays my face, and my cheeks stretch into a mighty grin. So that's where I would have left it. But because the publisher was doing it as YA, he wanted a much more concrete, this is a happy ending. So I ended up going, suddenly it comes to me, a plan. I'm going to save up and buy myself one of these big boats, maybe even a bigger one with sails and bed and shit, so that by the time Dougie gets out for good, we'll be set to go. We'll steer out of this bloody river like we should have done all those years ago on our raft, sail out into the bay and just keep going east, far, all the way to Fiji and Hawaii, whatever we hit first. Ready at last to be what we were always meant to be, thrill seekers. Boom, 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 boom. So I gave him the ending he wanted, but I like the other one better still. But, so you can see sometimes you need to write on a little bit just to give us that ray of hope, or there may be with memoir that little bit that you haven't lived yet of that central quest or question. So, as Kerstin was saying, we are now going to write an ending. Now, I know, Liana, it's great to do it, Liana. Liana's been coming to my little local retreats for years now, and one of her big issues was never finishing. But have you finished now, Liana? Yes, 1,
Yeah.
2, not yet.
Yeah. No, well, I haven't finished the second book, but I have written the end.
Oh, yes. Okay. All right. Well, how are you going to do it now? You can review your end now with the new tips. Okay.
Yeah.
So everybody get ready, feet planted on the floor. Just do a little coming into our creative zone now. So just sitting back into your body. Focusing on the breath. Letting the shoulders drop. Every out breath sinking us deeper. And on your inner movie screen, or however you best visualize, or some people can't visualize, however you best run through your story in your head, I want you to imagine your book playing out. So you're opening the main plot points where you think it's going to go, and I want you to envision your ending. We're going to write a scene on that ending. So where are the you or the characters? Where are we? Show us some specific unexpected details of that setting to ground us in that time and place. What can you see, hear, feel, smell, taste? Is there a taste in the air? Is there a taste of a feeling? What is the action? What's going on? There may be a moment of reflection, but we also want some action. And is there dialogue? What are the characters? Who is present? What action is there? Is there a little ray of hope? Can you think of something from your beginning that you can seamlessly slide in here somehow? Can you find a strong, resonant image? Something that the reader will take away with them, that will resonate with them for far longer than after they've read the last words. Okay, holding that image, holding that scene in your mind, gently rousing the body with some big breaths to the chest. Opening the eyes, I'll put the timer on for 5. And go. 6 seconds. Okay, if you're on a super roll, keep going. How'd you go, Liana? Did you change anything?
I've added a couple of things in. I think I always, I find it always hard to boil down the sort of central quest or question, but I've sort of got a couple in mind, and I realized that there's probably another couple of threads that I could weave into the last few sort of resolution scenes to really kind of round out a very satisfying conclusion. And then I also changed one of the opening lines in my previous book, which I have open at the moment and I'm editing, because I had this one sort of throwaway-ish line in the introduction of it, and I was thinking about the ending and how it kind of reflects that, but I was like, oh, if I change that one line to something else, it will even better reflect that ending.
Yes, I just did that. Well, not just then, but I just did that this morning, earlier this morning, yes, because our endings impact the beginnings as well. So getting those two working together. Yeah, great, Liana. I'm so proud of you writing an ending. Jess, what about you? How did you go?
Oh, I went well actually. I'm just coming off the end of a first manuscript of a second book, so I'm putting that aside for Christmas and do a structural edit in New Year. But I have another idea which I wanted to start over Christmas, which I had a title in my head. But yeah, I think I've kind of maybe started the beginning and the ending all at the same time this morning. So that's
fantastic. That's great.
Over Christmas, so I don't think about the other one. I need to put that aside for a little while, let it stew, come back and see all the silly things I need to pull out and wonder what else putting in there, tear it to pieces basically. But I need to distance myself and start something new over this period. So yeah, great.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I'm so glad it was useful. Yes, I am heading for my big structural edit of the first draft I did earlier this year that I have left stewing, and now I realize I've had enough distance to realize that maybe the pot stinks. So
case, isn't it? No, I'll be doing the same thing. So I'll be letting that sit for a while, and I may not think it's so wonderful as I think it is now. Come January, but
yes, that's the writer. It's either a heartbreaking work of genius or the worst shit that's ever been written. So
I know
things. It's normal. Everybody, it's normal.
You jumped between those two feelings as I do.
Yes, that's right. All in one writing.
Walking off chuffed out to get a coffee, and the next day thinking, what was I thinking? It's horrible.
And sometimes it sticks. That's why we need other people, other writers, to remind us that it is not shit when we're on down days. Yeah.
On down days, definitely.
Yeah. Anybody else like to share how you went with your ending?
And you're also welcome to read your ending.
Yeah. David or Andrea or Sean. Sean's the brave one. Oh.
Sorry, I was on mute again.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the tool belt that I used in that first example.
Yes.
I heard that the men who built this famous bridge had to release their tool belts mid-air if they were falling into the Sydney harbour. It was to fall faster than them and break the water surface for the small chance that they wouldn't die on impact.
Oh.
I realized that's what I had to do. Sever the ties with my old ways and let them just rust in the bottom of that saline sorrow.
Yes, gold metaphor. That is fantastic, because that's what we all have to do, of course, is leave our baggage. And
yeah.
It's
how can I? It's who I am.
I was going to say, it's not just baggage, it's actually tools. I think that's even more meaningful.
Yeah. And it's conflicting as well, because they're your tools. It's like, do I let these go?
Yeah. Yes. That gives it a stronger, powerful meaning. It's a very good metaphor, very good image.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that works. Anybody else get a good week goodie? Tony, get anything?
Back to the chat we had earlier about
Oh.
and Elphaba in Wicked. Janine met
We go for a drive.
Was that?
Hang on. Oh, no, there's a whole lot of people entering now.
That's possibly to do with the time difference. Yeah.
Yes. Hello, people. We are at the end. I'm sorry. Okay, anybody else want to have a go?
Oh, hello, Ute. We can finally
Oh, we
see
can
you.
see you. Hello.
She's German and she lives in Cairns. So we have two
Oh,
things in common.
lovely. How did you go, Annie? Did you find an ending?
Edwina, I've had to jump in the car,
Oh, I thought
and
I could see a steering wheel. All right, I'll let you.
but I just want to say, because I disappeared off the line, I just wanted to give a plug for your retreat because it was amazing, and I just encourage anyone that hasn't done it. It's really good value, and you'll meet lots of people. And one of the people from the last retreat has just published a book, and I couldn't help thinking about the networking about that because it
Whoops.
Oh, and there she goes again.
publicity.
You got the plug in this time.
So, sorry, what was that?
Oh, you keep cutting out again, Annie. Thank you for the plug, darling. Yeah, Arik just his book, and it is all about the network. Yeah.
Yeah, the network is, I think, that he got, a lot of support. He had his support group and so on. But also when he announced that it was finished and that he had self-published it on Amazon, Edwina and I both gave him a plug on our newsletter. So immediately we put it in front of 4,000 people. So, that's another part of the networking that goes on. And then, of course, everybody in the retreat was very supportive and broadcasting. So having a support network is really useful. Yeah. And we're
those extra readers that you swap work with. They are invaluable because they're worth thousands and thousands of dollars, actually. Anybody who will read your book is worth thousands of dollars to you. Yeah. So anybody else want to share anything about endings or any questions? Kat, I just saw you were asking for an email address.
Yeah, I'm just writing it down.
Okay. And anything else? So the main takeaways for endings are: look at your beginning, see what you can bring forward, make sure you've answered your central quest or question, and tie up as many of the subplots as are necessary. Some series I was watching the other day, they didn't tie up a whole lot of endings, and I was left very frustrated. There was a child in there that they, was quite central, and they never told us what happened to that child when they grew up. They did all the other answers for everybody else, but not for the child. Find an image or words that are really resonant, like Sean's tool belt there, the tool belt going before them to break the fall. Look for your ending earlier or realizing it may come later yet. Was there anything else? And we just missed?
No, I think not. But yeah, that exercise of writing your ending before you've even written the book, I would recommend just do it as a fun exercise. So, and you don't have to use that. And I tell you that I wrote that 3 years, I think, before I finished the book. And it basically stayed pretty much the way I had written it at that retreat. So that was one of the few chapters that I had to almost not change. So it's very valuable exercise.
Yes, and it's great to have that, even if you haven't written it, to have an ending in mind that you steer towards and just keep writing towards it. Just keep going forward with your first draft. Don't look back. Don't look back. Okay? So
try to write the first draft fast, don't, like I made the mistake of endlessly polishing the first chapter, and those first 20 pages, as I mentioned, had to go. So write it fast, don't feel like you need to show that to anybody. As Stephen King says, the first draft you write with the doors closed. You don't show it to anybody because that allows you to give yourself permission to write rubbish, to write the vomit draft, the shitty first draft, as people refer to it. And then the second and third draft is when you can invite those critical eyes in, and also make sure you select them carefully. You know, don't give it to your best friend or your partner, because they might say, "Oh, it's lovely, darling," but they don't actually understand that perhaps you haven't, answered the final question and so on. They just say that because they love you and want to support you. So
Not, then they become your ex.
So somebody who is also doing what you're doing, i.e. another writer, is possibly a better judge. Yeah.
Much better judge. All right. Thank you, everybody. Sorry, people who have just joined up. We are on Queensland time, so we're starting at 9 o'clock, but it is all recorded. So I'll put it up on the YouTube shortly this morning, and then it will be in both of our newsletters next week. So if you're not on our newsletters, join one of them. And yes, we'd love to see any of you in Vietnam. You'd be very, very welcome. And we do always have a really great time, and it's gorgeous there, and it won't be hot. We'll leave behind it. Queenslanders, we will leave behind the hideous heat of February and be in beautiful, balmy weather and have a beer.
It is the nicest time of the year in Vietnam in February. So,
and the massages and cocktails are very cheap.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, and have
Thank you very much.
Hope that was useful.
And
Thank
thank
you so much.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.